Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning, Father, seeking to draw near unto thee. We pray, Father, that you bless our efforts, be with those who stand in need of our healing touch and whoever may be out there who have physical issues and spiritual issues. And we pray, Father, that you continue to work with us, guide us, and direct us in all the ways of our life. And we pray this evening in our Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. For an opening scripture here, I'm coming from page, here we go, Colossians, and it is chapter 3, and I'm going to
tell me as we know.
read 15 and 16. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, which also ye are called in one body, and be ye thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord.
So on this side is scenes.
Sounds real
So
simple.
what we were using before was this live stream studio feed. So
Unfortunately, we had to try to
for some reason it's not outputting now. It did last week, even though it was expired. And right now it's not. I don't know why. But okay. So I created another scene this morning, which was one link.
You know, I wish we all had the peace and understanding that would bring peace to the world.
Going direct to the camera.
That would be ideal.
Wired input.
But
So that gives you
will man ever truly get to that kind of understanding?
selected here.
I mean, if you can't even comprehend the peace that God offers us, how are we going to comprehend peace worldwide?
I can't see
when we're so diverse and have so many different ideas. God has and emanates and all he knows. How we can comprehend that peace and how we can possibly expect the understanding that will bring peace into the world. unfortunately, most of the world doesn't seem to be interested either in Jesus or peace. As far as they're concerned, the dissension is what helps them. When we start bickering and arguing and splitting off into our own little things, that's when things will go smooth for you because he's happy. I'm referring to the devil, not the Lord. As long as you're not thinking about God, as long as you're not praying, as long as you're not coming to church, he's happy. And you're doing just what he wants. It's when we can't be content at sin. You know, as soon as you get to the point where you've got a little bit of money in the bank and a little bit of food in the fridge, the car's running right, and the house doesn't have a leak in the roof, we find some things to squabble about. And, you know, it's one of the, I don't know where it came from, you know, idle hands of the devil's plaything. It seems as soon as we have time to not be engaged in whatever it takes for you to do your day-to-day living, that's when we start getting in trouble. And that's the time when you need that prayer every hour. Because if you've got a prayer or a hymn that is in your heart or on your mind or whatever, however you do these things, that pretty much insulates you from those outside influences that want to come in. And when they do, just don't pay any attention, rebuke it, go on about what you're doing. I haven't finished it yet, but Jim gave us a book at our last priesthood meeting that came from a couple of the visitors that have been here Sunday. I'm about halfway through it. But it brings up some very interesting parallels between the church pre-Nazi Germany in Europe and the church that's here today, and how we've become rather complacent in our testimony of the Lord, you might say. It's not that we don't believe, it's not that we don't have faith, it's not that we're not going where we should be going or doing what we should be doing. But it's the fact that we've become complacent about what the outside world is showing us and is asking of us and is telling us we have to do. You know, we just went through the COVID where everybody, we couldn't even meet in our own building for a while. Well, we were lucky in the fact that we're so large and such a small group, we could actually comply with their spacing and just come to church and not be against the law, technically. I'm not speaking for everyone, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what you were saying about the anyway at the time. I figured if I got it and the Lord took me, that was his plan. If I got it and didn't, that was his plan. If I didn't get it at all, that was still his plan. So, I put my trust and my faith in the Lord rather than some experimental vaccine that hadn't even been properly tested. And since then, there's a number of lawsuits about that. So, I feel somewhat vindicated, even though that's not a good Christian attitude to have. We should be thankful that the Lord had watched over us and blessed us. Unfortunately, being content is a constant struggle for us. And that's not just the contentment of, oh, I need a newer car, or, I need a new pair of shoes, these are getting a little worn, whatever it is. I'm not content because I only got 3 deer this year instead of 5 like I got last year, or whatever your discontent is. It doesn't matter what it is.
That is how the enemy wants to seep in there. He just wants to make you uncomfortable enough that you quit looking to him and start looking for your own gratification or contentment or whatever. And it may be something as simple as, I have a bad habit of every day at 4 o'clock, I'm going to turn on the 5 just to hear what they have to say. And I have even quit doing work that needed to be finished and to turn on the TV. And many times, even if I'm cooking dinner, getting it ready for Mary because she's been at work, I'll have that thing on while I'm in the kitchen so I can hear it. And I got to turn it way up for that to happen too. But I don't need that, okay? They're not going to bring any peace and contentment to my life. In fact, it's usually the opposite. What they have to say just makes me a little more upset. We need to learn to be content in the joy of the Lord. Because all of the things that we are always so concerned about and so worried at the moment, in a year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever, they won't make any difference anymore to you. I think back in my life to times when this was critical, this was crucial, I had to get this done, and no matter what. And, a year and a half after that, I don't even care about it anymore. It's just sitting on the side. It's a piece of something that got done, and now it's done, and it's over, and I have no use for it even. I'm not even using it anymore. Tons of things like that have occurred in my life over the years. And we need to learn to, like I said, be content in the joy of the Lord. Because the Lord will fill you with joy. He will give you something to do. If you think you have nothing to do and you have no place to work for the Father, just ask him. I guarantee you, he will send work to you. He will give you someone to pray for. He will give you those people that need that little spark to keep them from sinking under. And we see it all the time. We run into people that we haven't seen in ages, or maybe even people we don't even know. And we pass along maybe just a kind word, if nothing else, that changes their day. I found this little quote, which I love quotes, famous people that say things that stick in your mind. This particular one is by Helen Keller, and I'm sure I don't need to explain who she is. I do not want the peace that passeth understanding, which is one of the prayers in the scriptures. I want the understanding which bringeth peace. And there's a big difference between those two phrases. And that was her wish, that she would receive the understanding that would bring peace to her heart, regardless of what was happening around her. And now it's time to take one hat off and put the other one on. We're finished with our morning pre-worship, and we're going to go straight into our Sunday school class. If anyone needs a break at this time, we can take a 5-minute or whatever. If you want to get up, get a drink, go to the bathroom, whatever. If not, hopefully everyone has brought their study guide with them, because this is what we're working out of, the book of Mosiah. And if I am not mistaken, which that's always a possibility, we should be starting at verse 50. And if I'm wrong, anybody that's out here that knows better can correct me. But I'm pretty sure that's where we left off last time. What was that? Oh, we're in Mosiah chapter 1, and we'll be starting at verse 50. At least that's where I had my marker. Now, I know we've got one mic back here. Is there anyone who would like to read 50 through 54? Now, there's a lot in this. We're going to want to go over this after it gets read. But if anybody out there has that place and wishes to read, I'll have Bill bring you the mic. Oh, Ray's got one. Does that mean you'll read for us too, Ray?
My eyes are watery today. Starting with verse 50.
Yeah.
Behold, you have called me your king, and if I, whom you call your king, do labor to serve you, then had not ye ought to labor to serve one another? And behold, also, if I say, whom ye... Okay, I can't read it. My eyes are...
I'll go ahead. I'll take over. Don't worry about it. Thank you, Ray. If I say unto you, my brethren... Okay, wait a minute. I'm skipping one. And behold also, if I, whom ye call your king, who has spent his days in your service, and yet hath been in the service of God, doth merit any thanks from you, oh, had you ought to thank your heavenly King. I say unto you, my brethren, that if you should render all the thanks and praise which your whole souls hath power to possess to that God who hath created you, and hath kept and preserved you, and hath caused that ye should rejoice, and hath granted that ye should live in peace one with another, I say unto you that if ye should serve him who hath created you from the beginning, and are preserving you from day to day, by lending you breath, that ye may live and move and do according to your own will, and even supporting you from one moment to another, I say, if ye should serve him with all your whole soul, and yet ye would be unprofitable servants. Now, those 4 verses right there are one of the gems in this speech. They're also a chiastic pattern. And you notice how he says, I say unto you, I say unto you, I say unto you. That's a typical Hebraism, which more and more has gone to prove to actual linguistic scholars that this is genuine, because there's, in Joseph Smith's day, 1820s and 30s, they didn't have a clue what a chiasm was, or that there was any. They always just considered it kind of like Hebrew poetry. It wasn't broken down into the whole chiastic structure that we have today. Now, I want to go back to where we started this, where he talks about the fact that even though he's their king, he's only been in their service. He hasn't done this for political power, for gain, for anything like this that we're normally associate with who's in charge. You know, whether it's a king, a president, a chairman, a prime minister, whatever you call it, the czar, Caesar, it basically comes down to the person that is supposed to be running the show, calling the shots when it comes down to the tight squeezes. You know, do we go to war or do we not go to war? Do we increase taxes or decrease taxes? These, even though the legislature and the Senate and all of that, they're the ones that hold the purse strings, and the other ones control the oversight, basically, of those funds. It still has to go through the president in order to be either signed or vetoed and sent back to him to rework it. It's unfortunate that we don't teach civics anymore in school, because most people have very little idea how our government really works and how it's supposed to function. I'm going to give you another quote here. This one is from a current man that you've probably seen. His name is Trey Gowdy. He's a former senator from South Carolina. And he was a rural lawyer. I mean, he sounds very rural when he speaks. But Trey came out on live TV. It's been, I don't know, 5-6 months ago, and he said, "I'm just a country lawyer, and I love the law, but I hate politics." And that's why he's not in the Senate anymore. He got out because he said that it was such a madhouse in there, and everybody reaching and grabbing for what they can get. It's unfortunate. I'm hoping that we have some new people that have come in that will kind of change some of this. You have a statement, Bill?
Yeah, they ought to realize that it's for we the people, not for me the senator or me the congressman.
Well, like I said, this particular section of Benjamin's speech has a number of high points in it. He goes on then where he talks about the fact that even though you call me king, and I do labor to serve you, why, if I, your king, who supposedly is above everybody, although he didn't think so, if I'm willing to serve you, why aren't you willing to serve each other? You know, it's kind of like what John F. Kennedy said at his inauguration speech. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. this is the same, I mean, these are almost interchangeable, the thought he is trying to convey here. If I'm your king and I'm serving you, don't you think you can serve each other? Can't you help each other? And that, of course, is essentially the art of civilization. How to get along with each other without resorting to force. Jim, Ray's got the mic.
You and I have always appreciated this. I think a lot of us appreciate King Benjamin's proclamation and him, the man himself, and you and I have always appreciated this part of it. I kind of wish, I've thought back if, I was going to teach a class, say, to a bunch of new church members, this would probably be one of the first things I would go through, because it so beautifully lays out this idea of stewardship that, we're not the owner of anything we have. Even our very lives, the breath in our body, and he goes through it and more eloquently explains this, but it really lays down this principle of stewardship that everything, our time, our bodies, our thoughts, everything belongs to the Lord, and we're a steward over that, and how we manage that, we're answerable to that. And it's this idea, it's not about, using gifts and talents to feather my nest so much as being in service to the Lord and to my brothers and sisters. Another point is, you talked about this idea that, the chiasms, and, nobody really knew back then, or certainly Joseph didn't. But the other thing is, the rationale of what he's presenting, this idea of being indebted to God, is something you find in 2nd century BC, or 2nd millennium BC, rather, ancient Near Eastern covenants. It was very much the idea that you were indebted to the great king, and this was why you owed him your loyalty, and that was shown in the form of a covenant. And nobody knew anything about this back then, but it perfectly represents and reflects that ancient Near Eastern mindset from that era. Well, gee, how did that happen? Because in the eyes of the world, the Book of Mormon is an artifact of the 19th century. There's no paper trail leading it back to ancient times like the Bible. The only other explanation is it is what it says it is, an ancient record of, from God's covenant people.
It's interesting that we have this, especially this particular speech. He gives us word for word basically what Benjamin is saying. He didn't skimp on this one. This is not a condensed version of King Benjamin's speech. He thought it was so important that they inscribed every word. And it was probably easier to put it on the plates when it came time, because they had already written it out completely and passed it out, because there were so many people there they couldn't hear. Now, I don't want to get into this too much, but I don't think that he just got up there and gave an impromptu speech. I think he had this totally all laid out, planned out, because otherwise it would have taken him a couple of days just to copy that many copies and get them sent out to the people. I think that was all prepared ahead of time, because he realized when he looked out there and saw how many had shown up, well, they're not going to be able to hear me. It doesn't matter how loud I am. It had to be written down, which means he took some advanced work and put into this, which, granted, this is stuff for him that he was living every day. So it wasn't hard for him to put it down on paper and explain it to the people. You know, we have the advantage of having it all written down here for us instead of hearing it for the first time. This was such a landmark proposal that he made to the people, this covenant that they ended up making at the end of his speech, because there is one there, that this was used as the benchmark throughout the rest of the Book of Mormon. You'll even hear Moroni mentioned Benjamin, and Mormon definitely does, because of the things that he said. This was considered kind of a golden age, even though it's a couple hundred years before Christ, when they did actually have what's considered the Mayan golden age, or classical Mayan. The way they classify things in archaeology, you got pre-classic, classic, and post-classic. And that rise, their peak, and their fall. Ellen? They're coming.
That made me think about the people of the time, as you said that, that they were a learned people, otherwise they couldn't have read what he had. And I never really thought about that. You think about them going about doing things, but apparently there was a teaching process among the people that they could actually read that which King Benjamin provided.
In the very beginning of this, we covered this earlier, where he talks about the fact that he instructed all of his sons, okay, Mosiah and Helaman, and I forget the other one's name, it's a slight variation on it, but they were, I don't think he just, the royal family was the only ones that got taught. I think that was put out for everyone, because in his time, during this, when he's giving this speech, he'd put down all wars and contentions. There was no disputations in the church. They'd gotten rid of the false prophets and all of that. This was, at any point in history in the Book of Mormon, when they could have had Zion due to their own efforts, this would have been the time. Ray, you had a comment?
A word you were searching for earlier. It's a proclamation that he's doing.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way through the 3rd chapter.
Yep.
Then he passes away.
Yeah. You don't really know the interval, but you think it's probably less than a year after he gave this proclamation. He was probably dead. They don't really give you a time frame for it. But he knows he's approaching the end, which is why he came before him. What was the first thing he told him is, I'm doing this because I'm going to brush the dust and the ashes from my clothes. The blood of your hands won't be on mine, because I'm telling you the right way to go about this. He's kind of explaining, he wants to make a clean breast of it so that when he stands before the Lord, he can honestly say, I told them. They knew. Which we'll all end up in that same hot seat at some point. We'll be standing before the Lord, and we will have no excuse for our sins except to beg on the mercy of Christ. Because we've all been instructed, most of us for all our lives, in one form or another. Maybe not necessarily in this particular church, but I think most of us were brought in some kind of a church. That's not the case anymore. If you talk to people on a regular basis and ask, if you'll ask, you'll get a number, especially in this area, that, yeah, I go to church every Sunday. But there's a vast majority of them who are going to say, no, I don't go anymore. I haven't gone since I was a youngster. Why is that? Why does the football game draw a larger crowd than our citywide churches? I guarantee you, if you added up everybody that was sitting in a church this morning, it wouldn't come anywhere close to what they had at that game on Thursday night. Which, you know, entertainment is entertainment, but on the other hand, when it draws you away from the Lord, then it is no longer just a recreational entertainment. It becomes a burden on your soul. Bill?
Yeah, I have a testimony about that. I started taking tickets at the Chiefs in 1972 until 2004. And let's see, I became a member in 2005. Well, before that, I thought nothing about working out there on Sundays or holidays or whatever. And same went for the Royals. I worked there too, but it was like just another day. Janice goes, don't you realize that this is the Lord's day and you should keep it holy? She said, it's a Sabbath and you should observe the Sabbath laws and you should know better. So that spirit of conviction took root, and I quit working out there in 2004. But it was, like you say, it's pretty saddening when you see more people going to an event like that rather than going to church. And it's not because of anything that we do, it's just because of the mentality of our people now.
Exactly. There's a difference between not going, like, I'm going to use myself as an example here. For years and years and years, I worked out in the ocean. And you just don't go back and forth every day. You go out there and you stay. When I worked for Jim's dad, we'd go out there and stay until we either finished the job or we ran out of material and could no longer work. And then we'd get a night off while they got more material out there. They guaranteed us 68 hours a week. My shortest work week was my first week with them, which was 72 hours. And it went up from there. I never worked another 72-hour week since the whole 4 years I worked for his dad. And when I went offshore on the drilling rigs, it was the same. We were working 12 hours a day for 28 days straight. Sunday, unless you did something yourself personally, you weren't going to see a chapel on a drilling rig with a pastor in there that you could go in and listen to something. Or no, that's not going to happen. Most of the guys on the rigs are just the opposite. Go ahead, Regina.
Talking about the sports, Roger used to say that was the beginning of the downfall of Rome, is their focus on the sports, and that brought their downfall.
Well, one of the classic, I mean, you can go back to Karl Marx's book on communism, and he states quite plainly, he doesn't mix words at all in it, and says, all you have to do is keep them entertained, and then you start taking over the schools, where you take the kids away from their parents' influence, and you're putting the influence on them. And we're seeing that happen in our own country today. It's unfortunate. It started back when I was a youngster. I can remember when every morning when we got up, we had Went into school, we did the Pledge of Allegiance and said a prayer at a big circle around the flag when they raised it. By the time I got to junior high school, no more, because of that court case in New York from the young man that said, why should I pledge allegiance to this country? I don't even like it. And they let him get away with that. And they took prayers and pledge out of the school instead of saying, if you don't like it, why don't you go somewhere else? Granted, we have free speech in this country, but that doesn't mean that one individual should be able to tell the whole country how it's being run. That's the unfortunate, and a number of things have happened that we have enacted laws over, and I'm not going to say that we could have changed it, but we could have. If the people will not allow these kinds of things to get into practice, we're too complacent sometimes. We need to be more active in our testimonies of the Lord in order to make these kind of changes. Now, we've digressed enough. Let's get back onto our subject here. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that even if we spent every moment of every day in worship and working for the Lord, we, as Donald Trump says, you're fired, because we wouldn't be worth our hire. There's nothing we can do that will ever earn you anything. You can't increase your stature by even that much. Bill?
King Benjamin's speech here, he gives a good example of what a servant is.
Absolutely.
And it's not easy being a servant. It means you give less of you and more of them. You have to become less, me and more you. And
It's a question of submitting our will to his will, basically, which that is, and to be honest with you, that is the stumbling block for most of us. It's not that we don't know what sin is or isn't. It's not that we haven't been taught the right things to do. It's the willingness in ourselves to either submit unto the Lord, subdue my will, doesn't matter what I want. It's what you want, Lord. Now, if we were living our lives the way we should be, trying to endeavor to create Zionic conditions, then our will would be the same as his will. We would be following whatever he gave us. Because it's like that quote I gave you earlier by Helen Keller. It's not that we want to rise to a higher plane. What we want to do is we want to create heaven on earth. We want to bring that here. Now, he goes on here to speak about the fact that if you render all your praises and all your thanks, everything to the power that created you, to Christ, and I'm getting down to the end of what we've read. Unfortunately, this has taken me longer than I thought. And he says, I say unto you that if ye should serve him with what hath created you from the beginning, and are preserving you from day to day. So we have to think about, and this has come on me, and I'm sure everybody comes to these realizations especially as we become a little more advanced in years, you might say. I'm not going to say we're old. You're only as old as you think. Unfortunately, many times I get myself in trouble because I still think I'm 50 and can do something I can't. But the fact is that most of these things we've known all our lives. It's not like we're just learning them. I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know and that you haven't already read. The fact that each and every day we are constrained to be repentant unto the Lord, joyous and thankful unto the Lord for each breath that we breathe. Not even considering the fact that in modern times, we actually have a more, how should I put this? We have a better standard of living than the kings and queens in ancient times did. It's not often that I don't know of anybody, unless maybe a couple of buddies of mine that have got some hunting cabins in some pretty remote locations, that still use an outhouse. We don't have to do that. We've got indoor plumbing, running water, air conditioning, heaters, all of these things that, I'm sure they'd have loved to have had that clay hut or stone castle or whatever it was they were living in, have some carpeting and some air conditioning in the summer and some heat in the winter and all of these kind of things, instead of being huddled around a fire. Now, I'm going to go on here from where we had left off in 54, where it talks about the fact that we would still be unprofitable, regardless of anything we can do. Starting in verse 55. Now, do I have somebody out there that wants to read? Okay, Bill, if you'll read from 55 down through 57.
And behold, all that he requires of you is to keep his commandments. And he has promised you that if you would keep his commandments, you should prosper in the land. And he never doth vary from that which he hath said. Therefore, if you do keep his commandments, he doth bless you and prosper you. And now in the first place, he hath created you and granted unto your lives, for which ye are indebted unto him.
So before we even, he talks about this fact that all he requires from us is that we keep his commandments. Like I said, it sounds real simple. We're the ones that try and make it hard. And what does he tell us? Right there. And he doesn't mince any words. He says, if you will keep my commandments, I'm going to see that you prosper. And I don't think when he says prosper that he's just referring to your amount of money you have. I think he's talking about your whole life. Because your stewardship is your whole life. And he's making you a promise right there that if you will obey his commandments, which basically boils down to being a good steward over everything, your body, your life, your monies, your time, all of it, because it all belongs to him. As Jim said earlier, we come into this world with nothing, we're going to leave with nothing because we are nothing. The Lord made us from the very dust of the earth. Now, granted, we have that soul, if you want to use that word, which is the body and spirit combined, I think is the general definition most people put to that. But when we're gone from this earthly plane, and that soul still keeps going, and it's going to go one way or the other, either because there's no fence sitting. It's got to be this one or this one. There is no in between. There's no gray areas. It's either black or white. Now, the Lord can do anything he wants to. And I believe that there's people that probably thought they were totally worthless individuals and that they were definitely going down to the bad place. And the Lord talked to them and explained to them, and they understood and repented. Now, they may not be in the presence of God, but they will probably not be thrown in that lake of fire either. And he never doth vary from that which he hath said. So he's not only given you the guarantee that he will prosper you individually as well as collectively, but he's given you a money back guarantee there, because the Lord is the same today, tomorrow, forever. He doesn't vary. He's the one constant in this ever-changing world. Who is willing to read for me now? Anybody out there? Okay, if you will start at 58 and go down all the way to, let's go from 58 down through 60 for now, and then we can.
And secondly, he doth require that you should do as he hath commanded you, for which if you do, he doth immediately bless you. And therefore he hath paid you, and you are still indebted unto him, and art and will be forever and ever. Therefore, of what have ye to boast?
Which, you know, this, he makes this so plain and simple. I really, you know, this class almost teaches itself. I'm not sure, there's nothing I can add to what he's telling us that's going to make it any plainer to you, because he's being about as simple and open as he can be on this subject. In this particular couple of verses, he's telling us that, first off, if we will obey him, he's going to bless us right now, instantly. That is a guarantee he gives us. I mean, when I say instantly, I don't mean in the twinkling of an eye, although it can happen that way. Generally, it's a process that he works through natural processes to achieve these things in most cases. When he needs to be spectacular, he does it. And then it goes on there to talk about the fact that even after all of that he's already paid you for what you've done, you're still in debt. There's no way you can meet the demands of justice because Adam fell. And that fall included all of us, because it gave us that choice of either following the Lord's commandments or not following the Lord's commandments. Because you realize that before Adam and Eve fell, they were just acting on instinct. The Lord, like any other creature that had been created, they were just doing what instinctively they knew was they were supposed to do. They had no idea what was going on. Now, once they ate of the tree of knowledge and knew good from evil, which granted, they were told, if you eat this, you're going to be like God. You're going to know good from bad, which isn't quite a true statement, but then usually from the devil, you don't get truth. You get twists and turns and falsifications. That original fall meant that all of us at some point in time have to repent, have to come before the Lord with a broken heart and a contrite spirit in order to come back into his presence, which is the whole point of this life, is to learn how to be in his presence, to put off the natural man and to assume those godlike qualities that he wishes to imbue every one of us with. And now I ask ye, say aught of yourselves? I answer you, nay. Ye cannot say that thou art even as much as the dust of the earth, yet thou wast created of the dust of the earth. But behold, it belongeth to him who created you. And I, even I whom ye call your king, am no better than ye yourselves are, for I am also of the dust. And when was the last time you heard any speaker of any importance on the world stage come out and make a statement like that? No, it's just the opposite. I mean, and I don't want to get into politics or anything here, but the candidate that I will probably be voting for wants you to believe that he's the best president that's ever been. I don't know if that's even close to the truth, but he would like you to believe that. I don't know if he believes it himself or it's just campaign hype. Jim? Did you have a...
Some time ago, well, several years ago, my oldest son, the neighbor boy and him was taken by their family over to another town, and they were playing in the park and with a tether ball, and the pole somehow got tipped over and hit him in the mouth and cut his lip. Well, they took him to the hospital to get it sewed up, and they wouldn't touch him because they weren't his parents. So they brought him home, and we had to take him to the care center, and just happened so that there was a cosmetic surgeon was on duty. So the Lord blessed us even before, so we're still indebted to the Lord.
Exactly. David?
Yeah, I was, King Benjamin is turning over his how do I put it? He's turning over everything to Mosiah.
Yeah.
He's getting ready to go to his grave.
Actually, he's already done that.
Yeah, he has, but I mean, he's now, in his proclamation, he's also proclaiming his son. And he goes on, he says, and the first thing, and then the secondly, he doth require. And he goes all the way down to where he makes mention of us being the dust of the earth, and then, of course, in 63, that we'll yield up our frame to our Mother Earth. He's going through the process of life in that the idea of this is my opinion of the view of it, is that he's taking from the beginning of birth, the creation of you as a person, all the way down to the part where you die, Mother Earth. This entire section of these verses are set up like that. And it must be that he felt that there was a representation that he needed to bring to his people, that your life is the life that you have to live in this new name that you're going to receive.
I think part of it was the fact that he, in particular, felt that the people needed to be instructed on the whole gospel. I don't know any other way to say it, because he basically starts at the beginning of his speech, and by the end of it, he has given you every aspect of following God and being in celestial kingdom.
Well,
he even gives us the prophecy, because he's seen it, he knows. The Lord's caught him up into the Spirit, the angel instructed him. He knows Jesus Christ is coming. He knows it'll be that it's still in the future for him, but he lets his people know at this time, a couple hundred years before Christ, that these commandments that they're following, the Mosaic Law, are strictly to take you to Christ.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is that if you were going to talk about eternal life, this would be a good way to open it up, to bring that principle to a body of people. And so I'm just making the point that those few verses there are a good platform. I think that he set it up for that thought.
No, absolutely. It's why it's included in here, because he wants, like I said earlier, he's already told them in the first part of the speech, after he has already presented Mosiah to him, and he said, he's the king now. What he's given us actually is a lame duck speech here. He's already passed on the kingship. He's just telling them, this is what you need to do to stay on the straight and narrow. From the day one to your last day, these are the requirements that the Lord asks of us. And thou beholdest that I am old and about to yield up this mortal frame to its mother earth. Therefore, as I said unto you that I had served you, walking with a clear conscience before God. This is one of the reasons he called them together, to give them this whole announcement. Now, I said this before, I'm going to reiterate it briefly. I think that this probably happened on one of their annual feast days. And more than likely it was the Feast of Tabernacles, because all of the people show up in family units. They all bring the sacrifices that they would normally sacrifice at the temple at this time. They all brought their tents and the whole, all of the paraphernalia that is normally associated with that particular festival. Even so, I at this time have caused that ye should assemble yourselves together, that I might be found blameless, and that your blood should not come upon me when I shall stand to be judged of God of the things whereof he hath commanded me concerning you. I wish I could say that. I can't say that. because there have been many times when I should have witnessed to someone and had the opportunity to witness to them and didn't for whatever reason. You know, I didn't think it was appropriate at that point in time, or which there is no inappropriate time, okay? It's kind of like the old thing that they used to say, there are no atheists in a foxhole. When you're in a foxhole, that means there's incoming rounds and you're praying. Everybody is praying that it doesn't hit them. I never went through that experience and can't directly relate to it in that way, but I can tell you this, there are no atheists on a sinking ship either. And I have been in that situation. So we tend to, in times of stress, run to the Lord, and then it's like I said, when we become complacent and we don't have to worry about food or a shelter or whatever, that's when we start causing trouble. Pat, you had did you have a comment to make? Okay. Up here then, Bill, to Regine.
In the Doctrine and Covenants, it says, of necessity, they feel after me. Like you said, when you get in a foxhole.
Exactly. And we have such an easy life compared to, say, 100 years ago even. And if you really want to make it tough, say 200, back to the 1830s. I mean, you're still horse and cart. You're, pulling the plow with a mule or whatever you have. Some people had to do it by hand. I don't know if you've ever tried to work one of those old hand plows that you push through the dirt. My dad had a small garden. It wasn't big. He only had 3 acres of land. But that's what we tilled with. That's what he said, you 3 boys get out there and get those roads, and I want them straight. That's the same thing the Lord's telling us. He wants our road to be straight. Not that we're not going to have any imperfections in it, because we're all going to have those. It happens. We're human. If we were all perfect, he wouldn't have had to die on the cross for us. There would have been no need. But because we are the flawed creatures that we are, and I don't mean to say this, that he created he created something perfect. We were the ones that introduced the flaw when we accepted the forbidden fruit. Now, as an individual, granted, I didn't partake of that forbidden fruit, but I can assure you that the things I did do were probably worse. As far as, the commandments of the Lord are not to be put on the side. They're not to be delayed. They're not to be trifled with, if I might use that word. I was told at a very early age that he had some wonderful things in store for me, but he did ask me one thing that I didn't do. And I've paid the price for that ever since, because he gave me particular advice, and I chose to do it my way. And my way is always going to be the wrong way, unless I'm relying on what the Lord is telling me to do. That's when you get it right. We're just about out of time. I want to get down just a little further. I say unto you, I'm starting at verse 65 here. I say unto you that I have caused that ye should assemble yourselves together, that I might rid my garments of your blood at this period of time when I am about to go down to my grave, that I might go down in peace. And my immortal spirit may join the choirs above in singing the praises of a just God. And moreover, I say unto you, that I have caused that ye should assemble yourselves together, that I might declare unto you that I can no longer be your teacher nor your king. For even at this time my whole frame doth tremble exceedingly, while attempting to speak unto you. But the Lord doth support me, and hath suffered me that I should speak unto you, and hath commanded me that I should declare unto you this day that my son Mosiah is a king and a ruler over you. Now, this is a reiteration of what he did at the very beginning of this sermon. But at the same time, what he did in the beginning was not to the people in general. He was talking basically to his children and his family. So here he's actually putting it before the people and declaring Mosiah is my successor, which they were well pleased with that. They all knew Mosiah. They'd grown up with him. They knew that he was a godly man and that he followed the commandments of the Lord. I'm out of time, and we will stop right here, which we will pick up at verse 70 next week. I would admonish you, go back and reread what we've just gone over, just to help refresh yourself. And don't hesitate to read a little in front. You don't know how many times since I agreed to do this that I have read through Mosiah or read books about King Benjamin and his speech. There's not a whole lot out there. The best source is right here in your hand. I will tell you that right off the bat, having gone through about 15 different books that are supposedly total Book of Mormon books, about the Book of Mormon, written by our church, written by the LDS. And few of them outside of the LDS give King Benjamin more than 2 or 3 pages in a 500-page book. Thank you for being here this morning. I appreciate it. And now, if we'll prepare for our next class, actually, it's not a sermon this morning. You're being blessed this